Hi, I'm actually back. Um, my name is John. This is Reading Redux. So welcome to my channel and welcome back. If you one of the few people who have stopped by before, it's been a long time. Had a bit of a reading slump in the summer. Tried to use the warm months to get out and be more active. So making videos just was not a top priority, and life has just kept me busy otherwise. But I did want to get back, talk about reading. So kind of emerged from that short slump. It's not that I haven't been reading. I'm a slow reader to begin with, so I don't. I'm not chugging through a million books a year. But I have probably since the last time read about 10 books since the last time I made a video. So just because of the time that's elapsed, I really, it's hard to go into depth about any particular work unless it's very recent. I really didn't want to have any recency bias, like, oh, I like this book better because I just read it. And I still remember more of the detail and the feelings that it evoked. So, really, maybe I'll just go through sort of quickly and just say which ones left more of a lasting impression, whether I enjoyed the read, and which ones left more of a lasting impression on me. And then I did want to talk about something which is very, very specific experience, and very curious as to whether other people experience the same thing when they're reading. But I'll get to that. So back in the summer, this was a primarily vacation read, but I read Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. Really enjoyed the read. It's one of these stories where something gets carried through very different time periods. In this case, it's a story, and so it's really about the power of story and how people seek comfort in it. When it is sort of carried through, how that brings how it's kind of a comfortable space through generations. Honestly, read this in maybe June. Don't remember a lot of detail about the story. It's a bit of a chunky read, but it was very engaging. It was very easy to get through this story. It kept moving, jumped back and forth between characters and times until you start seeing the connections. Reminded me of Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. In that case, it was a piece of music, but same premise, basically. Something carried through very different time periods spanning centuries. Good read. Never read All the Light We Cannot See, but, formidable writer. Enjoyed it. After that, I read my first Murakami. I read Kafka on the Shore. I also really enjoyed that. It was really engaging. I definitely see where some of the criticisms of Murakami come from in terms of how female characters are portrayed, and just generally the treatment of female characters. I get it. It was a wild ride. It's kind of hard to really describe Murakami stories, is what I understand in my vast experience of only reading one. But from what I've heard from other readers, it kept me engaged. That's for sure, right? It was not boring at all. There's Oedipal elements and cats and just lots of crazy stuff intermingled with some, pretty normal human, interdynamics, family dynamics. Yeah, if I had to recount the story at this point, having read it months ago, it would be difficult. But I do remember the characters. Some of the main characters really stood out. I am sort of looking forward to reading some more Murakami. I do have the Wind Up Bird Chronicle, so I think when I get around to it, that'll probably be my next read. This read surprised me. So I have Angle of Repose by Wallace Stegner, and I was in a used bookstore and I saw this one, Crossing to Safety, and I just picked it up. I still haven't read Angle of Repose. There's some controversy around it in terms of so his treatment of source material. He was not given proper attribution. Obviously, it takes something away from that work, but probably not the quality and the value of the work overall. But I still, especially after reading Crossing to Safety, would like to get to Angle of Repose. I really liked Crossing to Safety. That is a book that will stick with me. And it's, it's really very simple. It's a story of friendship, and in this case, lifelong friendships. So it centers on two couples. They meet initially in their 20s when the two husbands are both new faculty members at UW-Madison. And then the story later shifts eastward, which I guess for Stegner is kind of the wrong direction. He's very known for writing about the West, the U.S. West, but it was just a really poignant story, and it was beautifully written. That it'll stick with me. There's not too much to say around the story points. Just follows these friends, these two couples who really have kind of deep friendships. And, I think everybody, if you don't know, you probably would like to know what it's like to have a friend and a friendship that just will last probably your lifetime, regardless of whether geography, separates you and time separates your encounters and the times that you actually get to spend together. But that bond doesn't get broken and perseveres, and you know that person very well, and you accept them for who they are, flaws and all, and you just treasure the friendship that you have. I think obviously you can really appreciate and enjoy stories, even if the time and the place and the people are very foreign to your personal experience. In fact, that's one of the great things about reading, is that you can live through other people with vastly different lives and experiences from your favorite chair. However, I kind of feel like there are certain stories that you appreciate more given where you are in life. In this case, I'm talking about age. So I'm, a little bit on the older side. And I don't know if I would have appreciated this novel quite as much if I had read it when I was younger. Then I kind of hit kind of a reading slump in the summer. Like I said, I was doing more stuff outside. I don't know if it just wasn't motivated to spend a lot of time reading or what, but probably not the best time to read Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. So 100 years old this year. I read Virginia Woolf decades ago. A Room of One's Own, Orlando, really enjoyed them. Always meant to get around to Mrs. Dalloway for many, many years. Finally read it. Glad I did. I don't know if I would recommend reading something like Mrs. Dalloway if you're in a bit of a reading slump. So, she was at the forefront of modernism, and one of the things that modernists employed often was stream of consciousness, and so Mrs. Dalloway is essentially all stream of consciousness, right? And it hops from the consciousness of the different characters, Clarissa Dalloway being the main character. And so, I think maybe, if you're not in the right mood, like I said, I was in a bit of a reading slump. It's not fast-paced action, right? Or it's not even medium-paced action, right? It's really people's thoughts and their inner monologues and dialogues in some case. But about a woman who's a little bit older, and hosting a party, going about her day in preparation for the party, and the things that she's thinking about during the course of the day, and people that she will see, decisions that she made in her life that she sometimes questions, romantic decisions and otherwise. So very interesting, just if not to just simply appreciate the departure in narrative style, which 100 years ago was more of a departure than maybe some readers are used to today. But so wish I had read it at a different time, but still glad I read it. Took me a long time to get through this very short book. After that, I read, this was sort of really whimsical, just happened to see it in the bookstore. Hadn't really heard of it before, but it was Time Shelter by Georgi Gospodinov, who's a Bulgarian writer. Interesting premise. I'm not sure how much I really enjoyed it. I kept feeling like it could have been more. That's just obviously my personal opinion. But the premise being there's this figure who comes up with an idea for dementia patients to create essentially little time period villas. So, given that it's very common for dementia patients to lose their short-term memory, but still remember things from the past, sometimes very vividly. And so the idea was to give them a place where everything looked consistent with a certain time period in their life that they remembered fondly and vividly, so that they could essentially live in their delusions. Like if they felt like it was still 1975, put them in an apartment or something where the decor, everything screams 1975. And purely to give them peace of mind, right? I think people know often in those cases, if you try to correct people and tell them, no, it's this year, and no, this person already died, or, it's mostly just upsetting, right? It's so, and there's not much point in it, really. So the interesting part of the story is that, this obviously catches on. Becomes this huge demand for this kind of a service, I guess. But then what happens is it starts to become something that's desired by people whose cognitive facilities are quite intact, to the point where countries citizens of countries start asking for this. And different countries take votes and select a time period that they want to sort of essentially go back to. So, the interesting thing about the book is that it's clearly highlighting some of the dangers of nostalgia. Nostalgia, usually makes us feel good, but it also makes us romanticize things that, in a way that we tend to forget the negatives. So I won't go into current politics too much more, but I think you can see where the perils are of romanticizing periods in your recent history of your society. And I'll just leave it at that. Really liked the premise. Felt like I expected to enjoy it more than I would. So maybe the execution I thought could have been a little more effective. I'm totally remiss. I should be saying this all along. A lot of these are translated works. This was translated by Angela Rodel. So, reading works in translation, you always have to keep that in mind. There could be some nuances lost. I don't know if it was more of a language thing or of a structure. Anyway, certainly read it. Never really considered DNFing the novel at all. So after that, I finally got around to something that everybody says you have to read, and that's East of Eden by John Steinbeck. Wonderful. I get it. I understand why there's sort of overwhelming praise. Just sort of a, kind of a sweeping family epic, centering mostly around these two families in California's Salinas Valley, where Steinbeck was from, I believe. So really won't go into the story, except for the fact that the characters are really interesting. You do start caring about some of them. There's one character in the story, Kathy, who's to me is probably going to be one of the most memorable characters and truly scary characters in fiction. If you've read it, you know it. So yeah, really enjoyed that. Not much else to say there. After that, I read Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. I'd had this around for a while. I finally get around to reading it. I really thoroughly enjoyed this. Really interesting narrative style. It's, the Lincoln. His son Willie died of typhoid at like the age of 11. So this is right after Willie dies, and it's Lincoln spending time in the crypt with his dead son. He was truly, by all historical accounts, just completely devastated by this loss, which is understandable. But the interesting narrative style is that the entire book is really the ghosts inhabiting this cemetery and all of their dialogue and interactions, and their observation of him, because the way in which he visits his dead son is very unusual and sparks their interest. Really fascinating novel, just fascinating. Won the Man Booker Prize. Definitely prize worthy. I did pick up his short story collection, 10th of December. I heard good things about that. After I read this, I read one story, really enjoyed it. Haven't gotten back to those stories yet, though. Then I read, getting to some NYRB books as well. So I read The Doerr by the Hungarian author Magda Szabó, translated by Len Ricks, is that right? Yes. I enjoyed that as well. It's a really interesting story that entirely focuses on the relationship between these two women, and one works for the other. So one is a writer named Magda, and the other is an older woman in the same kind of neighborhood, who works for her, cleans house, occasionally cooks for the writer and her husband who don't have children. And the woman who's oh gosh, I'm blanking out on her name, but the woman who works for the writer is just a really interesting character, and she doesn't let anybody into her home. And so the door is essentially her front door that she, closes behind her. And that's part of her life that no one else really gets to experience. And it's just their evolving relationship, how they get closer. It's terrible not to remember this character's name. But just how it evolves. The woman who's working for the writer, kind of very difficult, seems like a bit of a curmudgeon, but is certainly not without emotion. And you find out more about her life as the story goes on. And it's interesting. And the door. The door has its meaning towards the, kind of a pivotal point in the story, closer to the end of the story. So I did really enjoy that. And, refreshing to see a story with older women as the main characters and not peripheral characters, mothers and aunts and things like that. And in fact, most of the other characters are peripheral, including the writer's husband, in the story. So they really, it's really entirely focuses your attention on the dynamics of their relationship. After that, I read an ebook, so I don't have the physical book. I read Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk, a Nobel Prize winner, a Polish writer. Again, don't have the book in front of me. Sorry. So I can't tell you the translator was. Again, another story with an older woman as the main character. This is kind of a unconventional murder mystery. which, a little bit unexpected because I went into it not knowing anything about the story at all. And I guess you just think a Nobel Prize winner wouldn't write a murder mystery. But it is quite unconventional, focuses really on this main character who's an older woman living in a very rural village where most of the residents are summer residents. And so she's retired and she makes money by taking care of people's homes who fly away or depart for the cold months. And she's, very into astrology, like very, very into astrology. So she's constantly, attributing events and people's personalities and, things that happen to people to planetary and, and constellation positions and things like that. And she has a close friend whose hobby it is to translate Blake into Polish. So they work on some of that together, since she also is familiar with English and teaches it also part-time. I won't say much more, but I did really enjoy it. I don't know if it's a book that will stick with me for a long time, but I did really enjoy it. One of these days, when I have some time to focus, I'd like to read more of her, especially the books of Jacob, which is supposed to be kind of her magnum opus, which is a very large book. So, but maybe I'll tackle that one day. Then just finished this book, Inverted World by Christopher Priest, who just passed away a year or two ago, I think, maybe just last year. So a British sort of new kind of the post-war more new age British sci-fi movement, I guess, maybe. And hadn't read anything by him. This is probably his most well-known work, maybe, although he did write The Prestige, which was made into a movie about two kind of rival magicians. So not everything he wrote was really kind of pure sci-fi. This is definitely sci-fi. Really interesting premise for the story. In that it's focused on people who live in essentially a city on wheels, and they keep moving this city because they believe that they have to survive, to keep moving the city. So what they do is they build short stretches of track ahead of the city, and then they take up the track that behind the city that they've already traversed, and then they build more track, reuse the same components to build the track ahead. And they have a generator with a winch, and so they pulls the city forward on the new track, and then they keep repeating that. And so it's interesting because the book starts off with the main character saying, his name is Helward Mon, saying that he's 650 miles old. So right away you're like, okay, they measure time in miles. And then you start to understand why. Fascinating book. Won't go into too much because at some point you find out something which completely kind of flips the script, which is really cool. I think it was done really well. This kept me reading straight through. It's not a super long book, but I thought it was a really great read. And when you sort of find out some enlightening things towards the end of the story, I think a lot of it is highlighting the difficulty of communication and connection when people's perceptions of the world are vastly different. And so, in this case, there's sort of a physical explanation for it, but nonetheless, it highlights the difficulty that if you can't even agree on what's real and what the facts are, where do you go from there? How do you make any headway? So if all of this sounds very timely and familiar, this was written, I believe, in the early 70s. But nevertheless, I thought it was a really cool story. So the only other thing I wanted to say is, there's this phenomena that I experience when I read, and I just don't know if this is something that's commonplace or not, but I often encounter very specific, often obscure connections to my life, and usually my current life, when I read, especially fiction. And so it's not things like, oh, this is a story about a middle-aged man who's going through these things. Of course, I'm going to find some commonalities, right, with things going on. I mean, very specific, detailed things that have some connection to something going on in my life, like now or very recently. And I just don't know if other people see that. I think we're all familiar with the effect of suddenly noticing something everywhere, especially like if you're in the market to buy a new car, and suddenly, suddenly have an interest in a certain model, make and model, and all of a sudden you start seeing that car everywhere and you never noticed them before, right? So I know that phenomenon, but this is a little different, right? Obviously, like I would read right past these things if there weren't that strange, very specific connection. So there's some of that involved, but it is strange. So some quick examples. Many years ago, moved to Washington, D.C., lived there for a couple of years. We lived on a little tiny street called Argonne Place, and it's like Argonne, like the forest in France, Argonne. So not like the typical spelling of like the inert gas argon or Argonne National Laboratory or something. So and so we had just recently moved there, and then I would take the metro to work, and I would read on the metro, and I believe I was reading Thomas Pynchon's V, and sure enough, boom, Argonne Forest, right? I don't remember seeing that previously in anything I'd read. Maybe showed up in Gravity's Rainbow years before, but don't remember seeing it mentioned in anything since. So just, happened to see that in my reading at the time I just moved to this tiny little street with this somewhat unusual name. The first time I very unsuccessfully tried to read Ulysses by James Joyce, my daughter was maybe 2 to 3 years old, probably 2 years old. Very, very young. Still figuring out language. How children don't learn language through formal grammatical rules. They learn by listening, mimicking. And then, then they also start to apply their own rules just from what they've heard, right? So if they hear the ed sound at the end of verbs when people are talking about stuff they've already done, then they tend to stick that sound onto verbs for that purpose, even when that's not the correct past tense of that verb, right? Because they're inferring rules. And so one of the things my daughter did that we thought was incredibly cute was that we thought basically she made up her own contraction. So we asked her if she was doing something or if she was having something, and she said, no, I amn't, like am not. And we just laughed and thought that was just so clever and cute that she had figured out that people take words and smash them together. And she did that with am not. Why not, right? Not realizing that that's not commonplace in modern English. So she just recently had done that, and I cracked open Ulysses, and sure enough, like within the first episode, a character says, I amn't. So that was weird. So these things are just, to me, seem really strange. Here's another example. Sometimes now I'm seeing that where I finish a book, start another book pretty quickly after one is finished, and I almost immediately see a very specific connection to the previous book. So I read, Virginia Woolf. Then I read Time Shelter by Gospodinov. Within the first 2 pages, he mentions Virginia Woolf. Right? I mean, okay. It's not like Virginia Woolf is that obscure, but just strange little things like that. So, I'm currently just started War and War by László Krasznahorkai. Just won the Nobel Prize this year. Another Hungarian author. So I just mentioned that I read Inverted World by Christopher Priest, and briefly summarize what it was about, and how this city moves, and sort of the issues that come when perception doesn't match reality. So keep that in mind. Just finished that book. Just started War and War. Literally before I even reached page 10, I'll read a couple sentences. He wasn't to know, and as a result, his perception of reality was incorrect. Okay? So kind of a key part of the story in Inverted World. Then literally within the same sentence, because Krasznahorkai is known for writing these very long sentences as kind of mini chapters, sort of same sentence at the end. He says, which is to say that everything ahead of him had been prepared and everything behind him had collapsed, as tended to be the way with all such great journeys, said Corin. So I just read a story where this city moves by dismantling the tracks right behind it, building new tracks in front of it to continue on their journey. Maybe I'm making too much of this, but I'm just curious as to whether other people experience this. I've gone on long enough. It's been months, but it's nice to be back to talk about books. And I appreciate you stopping by. Please like, subscribe, share if you're so inclined. And thanks for coming.